Hey everybody, I'm back again. It's Cory Ballad, and I'm here to finish off the video that I had started earlier. My roundup from the Vox documentaries. Took me a little break. I had to get the other one off of my phone because I don't have any space on my phone. Can't record too many videos at once. So I got that one uploaded and got it off my phone. So now I'm ready to do this other one. Had me a little meal and now I'm ready to go. So I'd already got my notes and we're ready to go. So now we just got the last two videos that I watched left. You got the ingredients of the ingredients of a classic house track, and then how a recording studio mishap shaped 80s music. All right, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, comment on the video about what I've said, share the video on other platforms. Go ahead and visit my other platforms on Instagram, on Twitter, on Tumblr. On my blog is corysong.blogspot.com, and there it is. So now let's get into this really quickly. Let's make this video maybe the same length or a little bit shorter than the other one. Okay, so this video, let me turn my heat off. Ooh, it's making noise. It's making noise. I forgot. Turn this little portable heater off. I forgot I turned it on while I was in the... Turned it on while I was doing a little break. Alright. The ingredients of a classic house track. So this one I thought I should do after the disco one because it was speaking about how house was the kind of a continuation of disco, how it evolved from disco and changed into something else in the 80s, into the 90s, right? So I have a few notes. It begun, oh, I think somebody's upstairs now. I'm hearing noise. Okay, so they might be back. Okay, so it began, they were talking about the disco demolition in 1979, which was a night at a baseball game where this he was a DJ. I think they said he was a DJ. He was a guy, he didn't like disco, and he said let's ruin some records. So he like brought a whole bunch of disco records to a Chicago baseball game, and it was a big riot and people destroyed all the disco records, and that was said to be the night that disco, quote unquote, died, where it began to not be popular anymore. It was one of the most popular things in the 70s. So this was supposed to be the night that it died, the disco demolition of 1979 in Chicago. Okay, fast forward to the middle of the 80s, or like shortly after that, in the 80s, let's say in the 80s, in the city of Chicago, different producers and DJs were taking disco songs from the 70s, sampling them, mixing them up, remixing them, taking parts out of them, like I said, sampling them, playing them on the radio as in a different format, with a different beat, with a different instrumental, and chopping and screwing, you know, doing the whole DJ thing. And this is where the house music came from. And it was, this whole little documentary was centered around this song by Black Box called Ride on Time, which became like a #1 song in the UK. I guess it was the first time that the house songs went to the top of the charts. So, and they were so that's what they were talking about, and they were breaking that song down by Black Box and showing how it had all the elements of what you think of when you think of a house song, right? So, got my notes right here. That song, it was built on the sample of a song by Lolita Hathaway. I mean, not Hathaway, Lolita Holloway, called Love Sensation. They said the song was remixed on the radio and on different platforms, and they would have cassettes and they would like remix it and distribute it and all that stuff hundreds of times. So yeah, it sampled that song, and it was basically what am I saying? That was basically what the documentary was about. So some of the classic elements of a house track, a house song, are the vocals, which are from disco era. Usually a woman with a big voice, and they're taking parts of a popular song that they made and chopping it up and screwing it up and putting it into a new song. That part, piano and the drums, these were the elements that made a house song a house song. So for the drums, what they would use is a 909. So the guy, something interesting that I found out in that documentary, the guy who made the 909 also made the 808, which is another drum machine that is very popular. We know it. It's used a lot today in rap and all that stuff. What else was interesting that I found out about? I'm sorry, I'm moving around so much. Detroit had another type of music during that time that was rivaling house, or it was influenced by house. They were influenced by each other. It was growing during that time, called techno, and also house had other different subgenres like acid house, deep house, and Italo house. And Italo house, they said that song Bride on Time by Black Box was a Italo house song because it sampled an Italian song. Italo house was influenced by Italo disco, which came out in the early 80s. So right during that time when the disco demolition happened is when Italo disco, I was trying to say Italo pop, was popular, and that's when the house DJs, the DJs that would later become house DJs, started listening to that music and sampling it and making what was known would be excuse me, my words are tangled up right now, would be considered, I'm thinking of what I'm saying because I haven't rehearsed this right, what will become Italo house and what will become house, what will be known as house later on. So that was basically the end of that one. Whew. Can't get my words out right now. So now the other one, it was a little bit shorter, and I thought I wrote less, but it still might be too long. How a recording studio mishap shaped 80s music. So this one was about the sound of the 80s. So I thought it would be good to do it last because it was in chronological order. Disco started in the 70s. House, it was in the 80s. It was influenced by disco, but in the 80s. So you know. But house was in the 90s as well. So I don't know. It was kind of in the late 80s, but it was growing in the 80s, and so it went together with disco, and they talked about it in the other one with the disco. So I was like, okay, I'll put those together. Then I was like, because the 80s one was the first one that I watched. But anyway, that's enough of me explaining my process. So this one was how a recording studio mishap shaped 80s music. What this one was about was the sound of the 80s, which was basically specific drum sound that they made popular during that time, and it was referred to as gated reverb. It was popularized by Phil Collins. It started off when Genesis, which is a group that Peter Gabriel, who is a legendary pop artist who did that video Sledgehammer, which was like considered one of the best music videos ever, and Phil Collins, who's also a legendary pop artist. They were in a band together called Genesis in the 70s before they branched out and became solo artists, right? If you did not know. And so they were in the studio, and when they were still in Genesis, and they were working with their producers and engineers and stuff, and they had just got some new stuff in the studio, which included a mic that hung in the studio, so the engineers and the producer could talk to the band while they were recording inside of the recording booth. And Phil Collins was playing drums, and he made a specific noise, and the mic caught this, and the way that the mic was, with all the way it was built, it made a specific sound that was really enjoyable, and they liked it. And then they put it on Peter Gabriel's album, and it was a song called Intruder, and it wasn't well known. I don't think it was released as a single, but that was in 1980, it said. And then Phil Collins made the sound popular in his song In the Air Tonight. So it's kind of like a booming drum that goes throughout the whole song, like basically, because I'm not really technical, but that was what they were basically saying that the sound is, which if you watch the video, the documentary, they'll play some of the songs and you'll know exactly what it is. It's just that booming drum sound that goes throughout the whole song, pretty much. So Phil Collins popularized that in his song. Then other artists started using this gated reverb, like Prince. He was one of the most popular artists in the 80s, and he was doing that a lot. So John Mellencamp and Hall & Oates during the 80s, they were doing it. And so the reason why they were doing this documentary, this girl who does these documentaries, she was listening. This was in 2017. She had been listening to music from that time, and from the last couple of years have been using that sound. So artists had started reusing that sound because it was only popular in the 80s, and then in the 90s it wasn't popular, and she was saying it was re-emerging. So she also said people like Taylor Swift and Lorde were using the sound during that time in 2015, 16, 17, 14, all those years. Probably now still too. I don't know. I haven't been listening to these people, so I don't know. And then the last thing that I took away from this video was they basically gave us a history of reverb, which, again, I'm not a technical person when it comes to music. I just like listening to it, like singing. I like writing and stuff like that. I used to try to play an instrument, but I stopped. I'd like to get back into it, but not that technical at this point. I'm learning. So the history of reverb. So it was first started off in the echo chamber, which was a room that was a large room where people would sing or play instruments in, and it would like resound. Reverb is just like kind of like an echo, pretty much. Then it was plate reverb. Then it was the AMS RMX16, which was like a machine. So it went from the natural way, then it started going into machines and computer, basically. So then That was in the 80s. So nowadays we have sample packs and plugins. So that was the history of reverb. All of that in that video. So I'm sorry I keep moving around. My arms are tired. So yeah, those were those two. I'm looking at my notes. The ingredients of a classic house track and how a recording studio mishap shaped 80s music. So there you go. 3 different segments, eras in music, styles of music in those 3 little short documentaries. Thank you for watching. I learned a lot of stuff from it, technical stuff, because I don't know anything technical, and it was interesting. Hope you found it interesting as well. Now, you could go check out the videos as well, the documentaries. They're cool. All right, I'm out of here. Bye. Dude.